come in. So with that, I'll start the meeting now. 4 minutes past 3. Apologies for that, everybody. And funny enough, going to go into agenda item number 1, which is apologies, substitutions, and declarations of interest. I see in the chat we've had a declaration from Chris regarding item number 5, the Bogleston Community Council. I myself am a member of Inverclyde Leisure, and so is Councillor Quinn. Lynn is also a member. I think that is all the interests. So we do have an apology for Natasha, who will be joining us for the education part of the meeting. So with that...
Convener?
Yes.
Jim McLeod here.
Yes, Jim.
I need to declare an interest regarding partway branching out, regarding the regeneration fund.
Okay, Jim, we'll take a note of that.
Okay.
And thanks for that. We'll swiftly move on to agenda item number 2, which is the community side of the agenda. And I'll let, I think it might be Ian starting on this, and then if necessary, Hugh Scott or Tony will come in. Ian.
Thanks, Convener. Yes, so this is it's a revenue budget report up to the end of 31st of December 2020, and it's showing an overspend of 1.178 million, and that's an increase in expenditure of 218,000 since the last committee. The projections include net COVID costs of 1.279. I think this is the wrong one actually, hold on. Bear with me, I'll find my paper. Having technical issues, sorry. I'm sorry, but my laptop is hung up.
What we'll do is we'll let Tony take us through Ruth.
Okay, Convener, I'll do the introduction and then hopefully it will give you a chance to catch up. So this is the, if I start with the revenue budget monitoring report, it's a projected underspend of 139,000, which is a decrease of expenditure of 38,000 since the last committee. If we look at the earmarked reserves, there's a total of 152,000, of which 60,000 is projected to be spent in the current financial year. If we go over to the Communities Capital Programme, overall, we're projecting to contain the costs of the 2023 capital programme within the available budgets. Paragraph 4.2 gives a full update on all of the projects, and the committee have been asked to note the contents of the report, but also the progress of the survey works in relation to the tennis facility.
Okay, thanks on that, Ruth. I think that will suffice as first of all, and then I'll open it to questions for members. Councillor Wilson, David, first of all.
Yeah, Ruth, could I take you to 2.1 and the second paragraph? Projections include net COVID costs of 1.533 million, which will be fully funded by the Council's agreed COVID-19 budget, including 1.461 million from the Scottish Government grants. Should that not be the UK Government grants? Because the COVID money came from the UK Government and then distributed by the Scottish Government.
Through you, Convener, it comes to us from the Scottish Government. I think the UK Government gives some of the money to the Scottish Government, but it's coming to Inverclyde Council from the Scottish Government, so that's why I said that. It's them to pay into a bank.
I don't accept that.
David, from an officer's point of view, the officers obviously deal direct with the Scottish Government with regard to the COVID money. So therefore the money comes, it might be the UK Government via the Scottish Government. From an officer's point of view, it's coming to them from the Scottish Government. For when they're writing a paper, it's only right that they put in where they're getting the money from. I know in a political sense, we can argue where it's coming from and who's paying for it. But from an officer's view, they're dealing with the Scottish Government.
But the next thing we'll be saying the furlough money came from the Scottish Government.
Let's take one at a time, David. It's home to questions. Chris Curley, I see you've got your hand up. Are you wishing to ask a question?
Oh, just a point of order. I think eventually it always comes back to us as taxpayers, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, okay. So, any other questions? As I say, we've got the updates on a number of things, including the Lady Alice Bowling Club, the indoor tennis facility, Windhill Golf Club recycling works. So there's a full rundown there. If there's no other questions that I can't see, can we agree the paper?
Convener, can I ask a question, please?
Yes, certainly, Tim. Sorry for not coming back to you.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask regarding the community hub at King George VI. I mean, first of all, it's great that we got this money from the Scottish Government Regional Capital Grant Fund, which was good news, and well done to officers for putting that bid together. I just wondered if we've got any sort of indication. Sorry if this was discussed yesterday at Port Glasgow Town Centre regeneration meeting. I wasn't at the meeting yesterday. I was at the ADP meeting instead. But I just wondered if there's been any sort of indication as to when we could possibly see the community facility coming into use. If I could find that out, that'd be good. Thanks.
I could put that probably best to Tony or to Hugh.
For yourself, Convener, we had a meeting with Property Services last week. We're probably hoping for the building to be complete at the end of 2022.
Okay, Jim.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much.
Tommy?
Yep, thanks, Convener. Just a question for Eddie or Hugh, please. I've been approached by a couple of organisations regarding Grieve Road, which I see is scheduled to finish for the end of June. So, are you guys comfortable with me advising them to start contacting Inverclyde Leisure for lets for July onwards? Thanks, Convener.
I'll take that one, Hugh.
Yeah,
So you, Convener, there's the last piece of work to be undertaken at the building is kind of installation of windows in the hall, and that part requires a building warrant, and there's a couple of other alterations. It's almost there. We don't have a firm date at the moment, but it should be summer. So I wouldn't be committing to dates just yet until I know I've got a programme for these last couple of items of work, but it should certainly be summer.
Okay, thanks for that.
Is that okay, Tommy? Any other questions? If there are no other questions, can we agree the paper? And can we move on to agenda item number 3? And as we know, this has been a long-standing item that hopefully we've found a solution for. I'll let Tony introduce the paper. Tony.
I think it's my turn to introduce the paper. Tony's going to take the grants to voluntary organisations.
Okay.
So this is a paper to look at a possible solution for crawl holes for community pitches managed by Inverclyde Leisure. And the committee will remember that this was a request of the committee from last March 2020 to look at the solutions that we could possibly come up with, particularly in relation to the Inverclyde Leisure managed crawl holes at the 3G community pitches, so Parkley, Broomhill and Drumshanty Road, Gourock. These pitches are high quality pitches and they're predominantly used for bookings for local clubs to play games and to train. There are inevitable tensions between the provision of crawl holes and maintaining a high facility that's of sufficient quality for club lets. And this paper hopefully comes up with a reasonable and pragmatic solution to get over that. And to just explain a little bit of what the tensions are. If we have high quality pitches, that they cost a lot of money to maintain, and when people let them, they reasonably expect the pitches to be safe. They don't want lots of broken glass, and we have to make sure that if we're renting out pitches for people to play on football on, that they're absolutely safe to use. We have to do that. By putting crawl holes in, we're opening the pitches, and what it's really crawl holes are predominantly for is for allowing ad hoc play by young people who wish to use the facilities when they're no longer when there's no let in place. It's not meant for anything else. It's meant for younger people just on an ad hoc basis, and nobody wants to stop that happening. Absolutely nobody. But what happens is, if the crawl holes are open, they're used beyond that, and they will begin to be used for antisocial gatherings. And the pitches are getting ruined. They're getting glass on them, and they're becoming unsafe. So we have to somehow find a reasonable compromise to allow what we want to happen, which is young children to be able to access them when they're not being used, and also for the clubs to be able to let the high quality pitches which we have for them. Hopefully this is a solution that is workable, and that will stop most of, not all of, the issues that are arising. Now, most of the issues arrive through antisocial behaviour in the evening. So what this paper proposes is that actually we keep the crawl holes open. The crawl holes would normally be open. However, we will close them in the evening. So that what we're doing there is basically stopping the antisocial behaviour, the broken glass being on the pitches, which means basically that nobody can use it beyond that because it becomes unsafe. So this paper is proposing that we do this for 2 of the pitches, not all 3. So we're proposing this for Broomhill and Drumshanty Road. Parklea, whilst we appreciate the issues around Parklea, there are other football pitches just 200 yards down from the 3G pitches that could be used. So actually the young people, if they're really intent on playing football, can use other pitches. We are asking for £20,000, just under, to be used to provide a facility for doing this. In order to open and close the crawl holes, we need somebody to be able to drive around. We also need somebody who will have the time to check the pitches. It's not just a 5-minute job to open a crawl hole. You need to check that everything's safe as well. And we're proposing to give Inverclyde Leisure money to do this on a pilot basis to see if we can meet the needs of all the community. We're proposing to take that money from the Under-19 sports grant. There are a couple of reasons why we are looking at this. One is it's promoting Under-19 sports, so for me it's reasonable to use the money from a similar pot. This is not an issue that has been caused by COVID. This was an issue we had pre-COVID, so we can't use any COVID recovery funding for that because it was an issue that, to be honest, existed before COVID. And also, if the pilot is successful, my recommendation to you is that if it comes from the Under-19 sports grant, then that will give you a sustainable budget line to be able to keep the project going. I appreciate everybody has opinions on this, and there will be differing opinions, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. Thanks for that very comprehensive preview of the issues. I'll open it up to questions first of all. I've got a question from Chris and then Stephen. Chris Curley.
Thank you, Jim. I think from my point of view, I think it's good to see this done, and I agree that certainly for Parklea there doesn't seem to be any real need for it to happen there because of the adjacent pitches and the adjacent green space, to be fair, really. What I would suggest though, I'm not very comfortable with the grants to voluntary orgs being the source of the funding. We're also in a situation we've got deficit funding in Inverclyde Leisure anyway, so I would presume that we just capture that cost, or could we just capture that cost within that funding?
Okay, that's a direct challenge to you, Ruth. Why not just put it in with all the Inverclyde Leisure funding, since we're deficit funding them just now anyway?
Possibility for the committee to take. What I would say is that actually, if we've got an under, and it's the under-19s we're looking at, not the grants to voluntary organisations. What I would say is that when we get back to the status quo, Inverclyde Leisure are going to have to find £20,000 from somewhere. So if we are hoping for full recovery, we're £20,000 short on that, and that is a provision somewhere. So I in my own mind, I think the under-19 sports grant is perhaps the most obvious place to take this from, because this is promoting under-19 sport.
Okay, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, we can obviously have a discussion where the best place to fund it from, but I tend to take the view of the director. If you want this to be a sustainable sort of pilot, then you need recurring funding, and Inverclyde Leisure money we're providing at the moment is only temporary funding. It's no permanent funding. But to me, I mean, we're dealing here with a generational issue that was there in my day. I mean, I've said this before. I used to jump the fence from Iona Road into the grounds of Port Glasgow High School, which then became St Stephen's High School, to play football. That was my playground. And countless thousands of people have done the same over the years. And it is a sad situation that we are having to sort of lock the gates on these pitches, not just the Inverclyde Leisure Run pitches, but the school pitches. It's a sad indictment that we're having to do that, and we're having to look at the crawl holes. And I have no difficulty in look at the crawl holes as a means of providing access for the future. But I just think there's a wider, deeper issue that we're not necessarily tackling and addressing, which is how do we try and sort of remove the antisocial behaviour, which means that we don't feel able to leave the gates open and let young people who live around these pitches use them. And as I say, in terms of the area of Port Glasgow that I represent, it's the pitches at the community campus, which are the community pitches in the area. It's no Parklee. Kids from Upper Port Glasgow don't walk to Parklee to play football. They climb the fence into the community campus to play football. And obviously we've got school pitches throughout the area, Notre Dame, etc., Greenock Academy, Inverclyde Academy. So we need to think, in my view, long term about how we potentially deal with the underlying issues, and I think that's through the community safety partnership and working with the police and the community wardens and young people to try and find a way that we can feel comfortable and leaving the pitches open for people to use, and the knowledge that they're not going to be vandalised. I mean, maybe I'm being idealistic, but I just think that in an ideal world is where we want to go. And we've had a petition in the past around the pitches at Inverclyde Academy, and the argument was made before Inverclyde Academy was built, there was blazed pitches there at Ravenscraig, which were open to the world. So basically there wasn't a big fence around them, and when teams weren't playing on them, you could just go along and kick a ball and play on them. And those have effectively been lost because we've built the school and put a fence, and if there are no pitches aren't open to the public, then they're not got access. So I'm happy with the recommendations in the report, but I just want officers and community safety partnership partners to think potentially about how we could over time try and remove the problem that's leading us to not want to open these pitches for wider public use.
Yeah, I think your point's well made, Stephen. I think the problem we've got is 99% of young people who use these pitches will use them the way they should be. And the problem we have is just maybe 1%, which is the same everywhere, that spoils it for the rest. What I wasn't too sure of on the back of Stephen's thing, are the pitches insured? Is there something that if we allowed open access that they wouldn't be insured anymore? I don't know who can comment on that, and I don't know where I remember that from the past, but it'd be good to make sure that I'm not havering.
I can maybe, we need to clarify with insurance the exact position, but they are insured, and I think it's not quite as straightforward as just saying yes they are, because there's elements of it are probably get higher excess than others, for example floodlights, etc. So yes they are, and whilst I totally agree, and I personally would like to see them made available for general use, because my kids would have appreciated that, and I'm sure the youngest one certainly would as well. It's checking all these other things out about insurance position. If you did leave the gate open, would you then be risking them saying, no, well, you're not insured anymore? So I think we did actually summarise this in a previous paper on this, but we'd need to go back and just check some of those those items and just update the position.
Thanks, Eddie, and sorry for interrupting members. Councillor Wilson, David?
Yeah, this is a long-running affair. I can remember back to the first plastic pitches we've had trouble with leaving them open and glass getting broken. First of all, I'd like to thank Ruth for having spoken to the chair this time and made him aware of what's happening, because that hasn't happened much in the past. I know that the chair is against taking money out of the under-19 grant, out of the total grants to voluntary org budget, and I'm very much against that as well. I don't see why, with the largest budget of any department, why we cannot find 19,000 in the education budget. And I know that COVID money's for COVID, but I know there's COVID money that's not been spent. There's PEF money, another 20 million coming that's not been spent. There's plenty of money in the education budget. And I am very, very much against taking this 19,000. In fact, I'm extremely disappointed that with a departmental budget as big as this, we've had to go a budget that helps out smaller clubs and teams in order to help them exist. So I'm very, very much against the whole proposal, and I would move that we do not go ahead with it.
Right. Can we hold it there? What I'll do is let questions come in, because I know that Chris has mentioned something already, and now you've mentioned something. So what I'll do is get the questions from members, then I'll go back and we'll summarise it, and then if anybody wishes to move anything differently, we'll take it at that point in time. Can I allow Councillor Brennan in first of all? Martin?
Thanks very much, Jim. There's a paradox here, and this was put into sharper focus to me by a former classmate of mine who's relocated to Inverclyde after 50 years in London and Cornwall, I gather. Being a keen footballer, he said that these pitches are great. He said that they're excellent. He says, but I don't see many people playing on them. And that's, I agree with the recommendations, and I agree with the logic behind the rationale. But I'm going over much the same ground as Stephen. I think we should start exploring ways of widening the access to these pitches to see if we possibly can, possibly explore what they've done elsewhere and see what success or otherwise that they've gained. As I said, I don't oppose the recommendations. I can see a clear logic behind them. I don't see what you can do, but it does look odd to have a wonderful public enterprise here and a great asset to the community lying unused for much of the time. That's what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Martin. Tommy, Councillor McVeigh?
Thanks, convener. My question's on 5.6 regarding the consultation, Ruth. Let's assume this goes through today, and we open the crawl holes at Broomhill. In the consultation, if the Mugger for St Patrick's, would them crawl holes be open then, out with school hours for kids to play leisure as normal, as you described earlier?
I'll hand over to Eddie on this. If the Mugger becomes part of the St Patrick's primary school pitch, we don't normally open the Muggers, but there would be some land to the side of it, is my understanding. But I'll take my lead from Eddie on this.
So you can be, just so I understand the question, is this the potential to change the kind of
Yes.
position? But yeah, at the moment, obviously, it's only the kind of full size pitches at a number of the schools that have got crawl holes, St Columba's, Inverclyde Academy, and the campus, and we don't have the crawl holes at anywhere else, even the two PPP secondary schools, because obviously they're managed by a private firm. So with the primary schools, we've never managed to kind of resolve how easy or not it would be to install crawl holes. Some it would be easy if they have a fence direct off of a kind of public access, but many of them have got multiple layers of fencing, so you'd have to have multiple crawl holes to get through. So it's not a straightforward one to resolve, not as easy as it is on the secondary school.
Oh, well, my thoughts are the crawl holes at Broomhill just now, and I understand, and keep me right here, Eddie, there's no access for the pitch onto the school estate at Broomhill. So my question is, the consultation will be, do we take this pitch away and the crawl holes, from what you're saying, to make it into a Mugger, which the kids can't use because there's not going to be any crawl holes. So I wouldn't be confident in getting that through, because I think if the idea is you get the crawl holes and we allow the kids to play. Now, if we have a Mugger and we still allow the kids to play because they've not got access to the school estate, that's absolutely fair enough. But that would concern me if we're taking away a part with access to in a Mugger with no access. But we'll let that's one that can develop.
I'll let Ruth come in there, because that obviously is a concern, Tommy, and obviously that would be a consultation, and we've not really went into the reasons why you'd want to change it yet. So I'll let Ruth come in first of all. Ruth?
Yeah, so it is just looking at the consultation and looking at the possibilities around the Broomhill pitches. We haven't gone into the reasons around it yet, but basically they're underutilized currently as pitches. And when we look at the cost of repairing it, which Eddie will go into, there is a saving there against having these high quality pitches which are perhaps underutilized. But I absolutely take your point that we want somewhere for the young ones to play, and that's why we're proposing a consultation here. We will look at getting around the issue, especially with the St Patrick's site, of if whether or not we can possibly use it with a crawl hole and use it in the evenings. But we have to be open and honest. You know, none of our other primary schools can do that because of the difficulty around the school estate, and also the fact that the next morning, if there's a lot of debris on the pitch, then the primary janitors don't have the capacity maybe to clean it up. That's why we're recommending a consultation on this, because we're not absolutely sure we need to find out the response of the community as to what they would like.
Okay, thanks, Ruth.
No, good point, Tommy. But Councillor Quinn-Lynn?
Yeah, thanks. Just to kind of echo some of the stuff it's been said already. Obviously, having Drumshanty pitch in my own ward, I mean, this was obviously a bone of contention when it was closed for all those periods and kids walking past it and not having access to it. But obviously at Drumshanty there was a serious concern about the antisocial behaviour, which was causing a huge concern for some of the residents that lived near the pitch. So actually over the Easter holidays, when we had the trial period of open for those, it worked really well, and actually received some correspondence for those that were complaining about the pitch and wanted it closed permanently. It sent and said it was going like a dream. The kids were down during the day, enjoying the pitch, and then when it locked up at night, the antisocial behaviour disappeared. So it definitely was, as a pilot, working really well for Drumshanty. So I'm glad to actually see that it's now going to be a permanent thing. So I think unfortunately we do have the antisocial behaviour, and it is a serious concern. So this actually covers all bases. So it is a really great solution to that problem. And I probably echo some of the concerns about taking it from the under-19 sports, because it really isn't under sport, it's under activity. It's all that, the great thing about the pitches being open is our kids are going down and taking part in activity and don't have to be linked to a sport club or take up a specific sport. It's really about activity. So I echo some of the concerns about taking it from the under-19s, but I'm just glad that we've got a solution. At the end of the day, as long as we've got a solution, we can argue about where the money's coming from, but wherever it comes from, I think 19 grand is well worth spending for our kids to have that level of activity.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. I'll let Stephen in, and then I'll try and sum up where we are, and I'll get guidance off of Ruth as well. Stephen?
Yeah, just two further comments. I mean, around the money, we need to remember that this committee is essentially two committees in one. It's the Education and Communities Committee, and this is the communities part of it. And in fact, while there may well be a huge budget in education, the communities budget's not a huge budget, and we obviously need to be mindful. Actually, if we're looking to find money within existing resources, it would be the communities budget, not the education budget, that the money would be coming out of, because this is a communities part of the meeting. But just in terms of the Broomhill pitch, I mean, I'll just ask Eddie. I mean, is it a feasible option to subdivide the existing pitch? I mean, the primary schools don't have full size pitches for their muggers, so is it a feasible option to divide the pitch essentially in two? Have one as a mugger dedicated to the school, and the other half as a mugger open to the wider community, subject of course to the consultation, because it might be that the feedback comes through the consultation that they want to keep the full size pitch and have it available for let.
Yeah, through your convener, it is feasible to kind of subdivide the pitch. Well, I think part of the reason for putting the suggestion forward is to kind of recognise that it costs quite a lot to kind of maintain the full size pitch, and within the kind of leisure estate asset management plan, we've got a new carpet that is scheduled for that pitch in the near future, so within the next 1 or 2 years. So it's whether or not you would go to that expense, which £200,000 to £300,000, or you would reduce the size of the pitch if you were going to link it to the school, because as you say, they don't tend to have full size pitches. The largest they have is a large mugger. And again, no need specifically for floodlights that are there just now. So it's a case of looking at the life cycle implications of what going forward, what the position would be going forward, and reducing the potential burden on the existing budgets that way. But again, it's all subject to consultation as to what people would like to see.
Yeah, but I mean, I suppose in terms of looking at that, there's the option, if it wasn't going to be getting used for amateur football, say, and you didn't need to replace the carpet as early as you're planning to do, then you could maintain it for a few years, and then if you were looking at replacing the surface in future, you could replace it with a different surface which cost less money and was more durable.
Yep, there are all sorts of options around this. Absolutely, you don't have to go for the kind of high spec that we've got in the current plan. Yeah,
I just think I think if we're going to do a consultation, we need to have a number of options within that consultation, and obviously people can put forward their own proposals, but I think we just need to work out sort of a number of potential options so that people know essentially what the options are.
Okay, thanks, Stephen, and I'm sure Eddie will take that on board, and Ruth. We can see that Lynn's put a question in with regard to Lady Octavia. Why is this not included?
I'll perhaps let Hugh pick up on that, because I know we're looking at the pictures attached to the community centres as well.
Yeah,
Tony?
Through yourself, convener. The Lady O pitch is connected to Lady O Centre, and it's not bookable out through the booking office. So that pitch is opened when the centre's opened, and it's only a lettable pitch at the moment. But when the centre's open, we are talking to Inverclyde Leisure about having the facility left open out with a letting organisation.
And very similar, as well, asking about Battery Park as well. What makes that different?
Yeah, that's something we could take into consideration when we're speaking to Inverclyde Leisure on that.
Okay.
Convener?
Jim, yes, I'll take you in now. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I agree in many of the things that have been said. I mean, I think it's unfortunate we're in this position because, as we all know, the vast majority of our young people are good, they're well behaved, they're responsible, and it's a shame that a very small element or number of young people are spoiling it for others, and that we have to take this approach as a way forward. I agree with Stephen's point about the community campus because, I mean, parts of Upper Port Glasgow as well are in Ward 2, and for some youngsters, especially depending on their age, going down to Parkways probably not an option. So, you know, I think we have to also consider how we can move forward using the fantastic facilities that we have in the Port Glasgow Community Campus as well, to be open for youngsters to have a kickabout or whatever. So I think that's certainly something I'd like to see going forward. We've spent substantial amounts of money on all of these pitches, so we have, and you know, we see the difficulties, or some of the difficulties that have arisen here. Why, when we were building them all and we were financing them all, why we never ever considered CCTV cameras at them, I don't know. And I just ask if it would still be possible if some of these pitches, particularly ones which are maybe having some problems, could have CCTV put in. I'm not talking necessarily about the CCTV cameras that they operated from Greenock Police Station, but it could be cameras that are operated from schools, community centre or whatever. It could be a smaller type of camera just to keep an eye on the pitches. And well, people might say, well, there's no budget for that, but when you consider the cost of policing, community wardens, and now this proposal of £20,000 for Inverclyde Leisure to open up and close up, open in the morning and close at night, then CCTV cameras can also act as a deterrent, and it might be one solution going forward. So my question is that, could we not consider CCTV, particularly in those ones where there are problems? Thank you.
I'll look to see who's taking that. Ruth? CCTV cameras on our estate?
He's the expert on this, but what I would say is probably it isn't as simple as that, we have to look at the cost of the CCTV cameras, actually catching the people, also the resource to getting people up there as well. There are somewhat of a deterrent. I'm not saying that, but actually, you know, quite often young people will have left the scene when anybody goes up there, and also. Even with, and I think we have to look at this as well. We have to look at with the antisocial behaviour. Sometimes it's when people are there as well. When there are adults around, you know, we've had some problems with people, young people not wanting to get off the pitches when the adult teams are coming on. So actually, it doesn't solve the totality of the problem, but we can keep looking into it. I don't know if Hugh's got anything else to add. He's got more expertise than me.
For yourself, Convener, that obviously myself and Eddie spoke about, you know, maybe trying to enhance the CCTV that's at some of our schools to look at the places that are getting damaged. I think the discussion about community safety is that we have a plan now within large youth gatherings that is looking at all these elements and working very closely with the police and the wardens over the weekends to look at this more in depth and look at where we are having issues. And that's discussed every week now at the hub meetings that's been set up through the Police and Fire Scrutiny Board. and I think that's very helpful, and we are trying to break down these barriers. I think the other thing to bring to your attention is not just young people that's causing some of this damage, it's probably the older teenagers, and maybe, you know, and that's our current issue. It's not just the young people under the age of 16, we're probably finding it's 17, 18, 19-year-olds, or even older. It's causing some of the damage, especially some of the pitches. So we are working very closely to make sure that we've got that information before we can and put a plan in action for every weekend to address this. But we are looking at CCTV cameras, but again, as Ruth says, sometimes that misses certain things, but it's more about taking responsibility, and we will be working with the schools on that.
Okay, thanks, Hugh. And can I welcome Natasha to the meeting as well? It's good that you've managed to join us, Natasha. Can I go to the recommendations? Now, there is 3 recommendations there. 2 I think are non-contentious, and that is notes the current situation with regarding crawl holes at pitches managed by Inverclyde Leisure. Now, bullet point number 2 is regarding the funding. Can I ask Ruth, the funding seems to be the sticking point of this, so everybody seems to be on board that they're quite happy to have this as a trial period for a year, but there's obviously concerns about funding it from the number 19s. Is there any, without need to go to P&R and without need to go to elsewhere to actually, because we want this done as quickly as possible, obviously, is there anything that you could think on that we could bring money from elsewhere, even if it's just, since this is a pilot, even if it's just for this first year, so that when you come back to us with the results of the pilot, we could then get our facts and get our overall picture of it then?
So the money given to schools, it's the money, I hate to say who by, but the money given to schools for teaching and other staff resources post-COVID, over £1 million, but that's for the educational attainment gap. We can't look into that. We can't look at the support given for digital exclusion and remote learning, because that's specifically for the digital. So that's all ring-fenced grants. The pupil equity funding is not somewhere we can go. That belongs to the schools. It doesn't belong. It gets devolved to schools. It would take a school to adopt one of the pitches, and I can't see that happening, and it would mean that the head teacher in the school community had to agree with it. Scottish Attainment Challenge funding is particularly for looking at the attainment gap. We cannot go there. That's agreed with the Scottish Government. If you as a committee don't want to use the under 19s, then the only place I could suggest going would be the COVID Recovery Fund, but that would need to go to, my understanding is, to Policy and Resources.
Can I ask, for this one here, you've heard the pushback with regard to the amount of money we're given for Inverclyde Leisure. Given the fact that we're given that emergency funding for it, I know it's not a long-term solution. Would it be possible, therefore, to add the 19,000 onto Inverclyde Leisure for this trial period, and then for you to come back at the end of that period for a long-term solution? I'm just putting that out there. If you've got a comment on that, I'm very happy to hear it, Ruth. I'm just trying to, as usual, get a consensus, because we all think that this is a good idea, or most of us do. It's just how to fund it.
Gwen's got her hand up and she'll know more than me, but
Can I say firstly, in relation to the COVID Recovery Fund, I think in order to remit that to P&R, we would need to know that this spend falls within the remit of that funding, and I don't know if that's something that Ian Cameron could comment on. It would need to fall within the scope of that funding, because from this just doesn't appear to be a COVID recovery item that we're discussing. And the other thing is in relation to Inverclyde Leisure. Again, if Ian Cameron could confirm, does this committee have any remit over the actual funding of Inverclyde Leisure, or is that from a different committee? I know that we certainly deal with the relationship with Inverclyde Leisure, but does the funding, is that part of this committee's remit, or again, is that a different committee? So these are 2 questions that maybe Finance could potentially comment on from their knowledge.
Ian?
I say you convener. Well, the first point on Inverclyde Leisure, obviously their funding that's agreed as part of the annual budget process. So if that's to go up or down, it's usually done as part of that process rather than through this committee. So I would say that decision to increase their funding would be a P&R decision. And regarding the budget, I think I'll go back to Councillor McCabe's comment before it. We've got two separate committees here, so it should really be coming from the community's side of the house, because it's a community's part of the budget. So the education stuff in that respect, it wouldn't be used anyway. So you would need to cobble together the 20,000 from maybe some smaller budgets within the community side of the committee.
I'm going to allow Councillor McCabe to come in here, as he's the chair of the P&R committee, and he probably have a comment to make, Stephen.
Yeah, you're not getting the money from the P&R committee, no. I mean, looking at the community's budget, in this financial year, we are projecting an underspend of 139,000. Now, obviously, that could outturn lower or higher or whatever, but we are projecting 139,000. I don't, and Ian will obviously need to keep us right, but whether there's the option to utilise some of that underspend and potentially earmark it for the future years. Looking at the sort of earmarked reserves for this committee, there isn't a lot. Basically, I think there's only the community fund, and I don't know whether there's any scope with, that's obviously Tony's responsibility, but whether there's any scope within that fund to take the 20,000 off as a one-off, obviously, and any recurring issue would need to be addressed as part of a sort of budget process potentially.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Well, given what Stephen says and given what our officers are saying, I mean, I take it that everybody's happy with the opening of crawl holes.
I think Councillor Wilson's maybe no, because he wants to.
David, do you want to move something? We're at moving now.
I would like to move that we do not take the 20,000 from the grants and voluntary art budget.
Where are we taking it from?
This is the Education and Communities Directorate. If I look at Tony McEwen's position, he's the Head of Culture, Communities and Educational Resources. I don't see why we cannot do a environment from education to educational resources under Tony of £20,000 to satisfy that. I don't think we can be operating in silos. I would expect the director of such a big committee to be able to wire money around.
Yeah, the only problem with that, David, I'm a wee bit concerned about the implications that we do this when we're blind and we order officers to do something. Gwen, as a legal person, you want to come in here?
I would just say that if it's not to go ahead, then it needs to be clear where the money is coming from in order to be competent. And if it is not clear where the money is coming from, then what is open is for another report back, setting out alternatives of where the money could come from, but that causes a delay to the decision.
So I think we want these open.
I think we also need to be clear that we are sitting as the Communities Committee, and at 4 o'clock there'll be the Education and Communities Committee, and there are other members. So we can't take decisions that impact on the education budget without the other members of that committee being present.
Now, I'm scared to open it up to everybody again. I'll let you in as the chair of the P&R, but I know it was Chris wishes. I don't know if you're wishing to move something, Chris, because I'm actually, given what's been said, I'm actually happy to move the recommendations in order that this gets opened, it gets opened quickly, and we have a sustained budget in order to ensure that that happens if the review goes the way we think it's going to go. So I will let you in, Chris. I don't know if it is a comment.
Yeah, so you're proposing to remove it as it is with the money coming from the grant to voluntary org?
No, it's the under 19 sports grants. We know it's the under 19s that use this. So
no, we wouldn't want to be doing that. I think we'd be okay. I'd like to be elected officers, but we're spending millions of pounds on Inverclyde Leisure. I know it's not a long-term fund, but we should be able to consider it within the short term and arrangements we're doing for Inverclyde Leisure. It's effectively the 19,000 out of how many millions of pounds were what we call were deficit funding Inverclyde Leisure. At the end of the day, it might not even be the full 19,000, because when Inverclyde Leisure opens up, we're saying, officers are saying here that the staff would be able to do this function anyway. So I think we just add it to the big pot and see how it comes out at the end of the day. I don't see how that should be a big problem. I think we should move forward. Let's not take it out of grants to voluntary orgs, and let's add it in. Or if we have to ask P&R to do that, fine. But let's just add it into the mix with the deficit fund for Inverclyde Leisure for this year. Next year we'll identify where, if it's still required, we'll identify how we address it long term for Inverclyde Leisure.
I don't think adding to the big pot's a competent motion, Chris. I think you need to be a wee bit more specific.
And I think my problem with that is I want these opened as quickly as we can. We're getting the later nights, and we want these open.
Convener, can I maybe suggest a change to the wording? You change it to will be funded from the community's directorate, and I'm sure I can find 20 grand over various different budget lines. You know, if you change the wording to, rather than taking it from under 19 sport, if you put will be funded from the community's directorate, and we can get 20. I do small environments to come up with that budget. That would work. I'm confident I could get that money from the community side.
Can I ask members, do I see white smoke coming out the chimney? Yes.
There's even white smoke coming out my chimney.
Good. That's what I always like to hear. So
Smoke died.
So with
That's
that,
white smoke.
So I know I was being facetious. So with that change to the recommendation at bullet point 2, can we agree the recommendations, Ruth? You'd want to
Can I just say that it's within the community's directorate for this year? We need to put a time scale on that.
Well, you're going to review this in a year's time anyway, aren't we, Ruth?
Yes.
So let's review this in a year's time. By that time, we'll know the better the position of Inverclyde Leisure, and we'll know the better the position of the funding as well. And also as well, you never know, by that time it might be a new administration comes in, and it wouldn't be me sitting here needing to deal with it.
One can but only hope.
You keep on teasing that, Jim. You keep on teasing that. You're not being nice.
So with that, can we agree the recommendation with the amendment as we said?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Councillor Crocherty?
Yes.
Lynn Quinn, Councillor Quinn had a question.
Oh, sorry, Lynn.
No, it was just to establish when they'll be open, because I know after this committee I'll have 20 parents phoning me to say, Lynn, when is the crawl holes opening? So it was just to kind of establish, is this immediate or is there a time delay until they actually open?
Does it need to go through full council, Ruth?
I think the fact that we've agreed that we can start work with Inverclyde Leisure, I appreciate the complexities of the situation. We did it over Easter. Hugh and Tony will start to work on looking at a resource for this, but we will need time to start to resource it. I'm looking at Hugh to double check that that's possible.
Yeah, I would need to contact Inverclyde Leisure to see if we can get something turned around within the next fortnight, I would imagine.
Is that okay, Lynn, within a fortnight?
Yeah, great. Hugh, if you can just let me know when that will be, just so I can let everybody else know. We'll just see my inbox.
No problem.
And if it doesn't get through full council, we could be adaptable.
It doesn't go to full council, it's delegated authority to this committee.
I'm sure. And with that, can we go to agenda item number 4? Now, obviously, we've had a number of members' briefings on this one, and this is a review to grants to orgs and under-19s and community hall waivers. And it's Tony that's going to take us through this. Tony.
Okay, thank you, Convener. Firstly, I'd just like to thank Councillor Brooks and also all the elected members for participating in this review. Got a lot of really good comments for it, and it's certainly shaped the outcome that you have in front of you today. So this report sets out a summary for members of all the comments that members and also applicants who have been in receipt of GTVO, and we're looking to make changes to the GTVO process for this coming year into a community grants model. I would have to say most of the changes to the GTVO are not radical, I wouldn't say. I think two of the biggest changes are probably the cap on the grants to an individual organisation to £10,000, which was really supported amongst most recipients of the grant and also elected members. But probably the most significant things from an officer point of view is that we will provide much better information to the grants subcommittee to, I suppose, provide a better rationale for our recommendations. I've provided a sample report as an appendix. Now, this is very much a sample report. In fact, Councillor Brooks has come back and given me another couple of improvements, which we'll certainly incorporate into the final report when it's actually done. But the purpose of the sample report is to give a flavour of what it might look like. This is a minimum, and I think what we need to be working on in the next while is say, well, there'll be a lot more information in that report while trying to find a balance to make sure the committee runs efficiently. So I'm seeking approval for certainly recommendations to move forward with the revisions to the grant to voluntary organisation and for members of this committee to note the review, and I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Tony. This has already been a long journey. I'll let Stephen come in first of all. Stephen?
I hope it's not going to be a long journey today, but I have my doubts. I'm generally supportive of the proposals, but a question around the issue of community transport. You recall that we had a discussion at the second members' briefing, I think it was, around community transport and the organisation that receives a grant of in excess of £10,000, and we asked for that to be looked at separately and potentially money wired and put into a separate budget heading, so just to seek assurance that that particular issue is being addressed.
Yeah, we will be looking at that separately from this review, because we understand the importance of the ICVSS contract. But there's other elements and other elements of the council that use that as well. So we have a further meeting, I think, towards the end of this month with Alan Perkins involved in that as well, where we're going to look at it out with the review, as it were, so that we can go forward with the recommendations of the GTVO review. So I'm giving assurances, I suppose, that we are looking at that proactively to try and get a resolution to that.
Gwen, are you a wee bit worried about naming organisations?
Through you, convener, just to say, obviously we are in a public forum, so just to take care in relation to the discussion. So far, this discussion has been fine.
Yeah. There you go, Tony. That's a rattle with your knuckles.
It's already in the public domain, I suppose.
It's absolutely fine. It's fine. What's been said is fine.
I suppose with that, the only thing would be what Stephen's comments are. Are elected members going to get sight of that, or is that going to be an officer-led review?
Yeah, as it would be for any kind of provider, as opposed to within GTVO. So I don't know if I'm required or need to take advice on whether to seek approval to proceed in a certain way, but I'll certainly take some advice on that. I couldn't say for sure at this point.
Okay, Tony. Stephen, is that okay on that for you?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Quinn-Lynn.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick question. Obviously, in agreement with most of us, we've been through the process, and it's good to, I think, the proof in the pudding will be the eating. You know, once we actually go through and see this in reality, then it might highlight a few things, but it's good to kind of see the sample report and encouraging to see our LOIT priorities under there. It was just one of the issues I had before was looking at the, you'll not be surprised to hear me say, but it was the equalities question in terms of, you know, where it meets there in terms of who we're funding and making sure we tick that sort of equalities box. So where will the equalities feature? So obviously we've got the LOIT here, but it would be really good to have a column there to show us the equalities in terms of it's meeting our needs under the Equalities Act to ensure we're not funding a specific group more than another.
Okay, the plan was not, sorry through you, convener, wasn't to include that within each grid, and it was to put a summary towards in the report to say, you know, either a pie chart or a chart to show where the money has gone in terms of the equalities groups. We've been quite clear that we need to see within the application details of the organisation, and the application form will determine who the target group is. But I would be producing that as part of a summary in amongst the report. So the report will have the detailed lines, but there'll be a summary at the end of each section looking at which groups have received what, how much each group has, depending on the category, who's applied, and some management information around that. And as I said, you know, the sample report will change over time, I think, and I think there's flexibility in there to make sure that members have sufficient information as we go forward. So I think there's scope there to make changes to as we go ahead, and this is really the intention, is the minimum of what we would be providing as we go forward.
So okay, Lynn?
Yeah, no, that's reassuring, because I think from the qualities, we need to look at the overall, you know, so I think we accept there will be certain groups that target a certain group of people, and that's fine. It's just the overall in terms of the distribution, as long as that looks reasonably fair. So obviously a summary page with that, having that there will be really useful. Thanks.
I'll let Councillor MacLeod come in. Jim, you got any questions?
No, Jim, my question was going to be around the community transport, so that's already been answered. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no other questions, can we agree the paper? Yes, thank you, everyone. Can we go to agenda item number 5, which is just outstanding remits? Ruth, you going to take us through this?
Yeah, I'll take you through these very succinctly. So these are outstanding remits from previous committees. I'll take you to 5.1, the 5 rights for children and young people. We signed up to the 5 rights, the digital framework, and what we are proposing is that we now incorporate the 5 rights in our digital strategy going forward. The overall impact on users of the Spend to Save at Bogglestone Community Centre. And this is, of course, prior to COVID-19, but prior to COVID-19, it was demonstrating an increase in usage of 60%, which is very good news. The mountain bike trail at Rankin Park, that's perhaps not been as such good news in the past. Members will remember initially there was a trial period with bikes being hired, and when the funding didn't come for that, there was little interest of schools to pursue this further. There is a need for better signage to promote that area, and that will be taken forward. And also we'll take bring a further report to you about further work needing to be done to ensure the coordination of maintenance on the site. 5.3 is about the local authority provision of cleaning for the police. And this seems a very long time ago, I have to say, but basically on the 6th of July 2026, employees transferred to Churchill Cleaning Services. So the financial implications of that have been contained within the Directorate. And No Knives, Better Lives, looking at the 10-year progress on that. And basically we are continually committed to No Knives, Better Lives in a variety of different ways. Obviously COVID-19 has impacted on people visiting schools, but they've been imaginative, and they've come with a sort of an online session with an interactive game, which will be delivered in all of our schools by June 21. And we'll keep supporting both detached work, youth work and CLD to deliver on that.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. First comment is from Natasha. Natasha?
Yes, I just wanted to say about the 5 rights. I just wanted to say I think it's really great the fact that as a council we're going to be embedding this a bit more, and that I welcome this move, and I look forward to seeing what that looks like. So thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Martin?
Thanks, Jim. It was just, I'm not 100% clear about a couple of things. The 5 rights for children and young people, very much welcomed. Now, there's a growing awareness of the benefits of social media and harms linked to this. do the five rights address this? And I may as well ask my second question now, and it's about the Rankin Park Memorial Mountain Bike Trail. When this was first proposed, there were ambitious plans, including school involvement. Is there any way of collecting more useful or improved data on its current usage? Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks on that. Who's going to treat, especially the question regarding the Rankin Park, Tony?
So you can read it. Yeah, I think we've recognised that we need much more data on the usage of Rankin Park, and Hugh and I are looking at how we would actually begin to do that, because people can just go on. So it's certainly something that we are thinking about how we might do it. But it was, of course, encouraging to see people using it over the Easter break. But I think we definitely need to think of a way of whether it's counting people in one day or a couple of days over the next couple of months. That might be something that we need to do.
Okay, Chris? Chris,
sorry, Jim. I asked about the five rights.
Oh, sorry, Martin. Sorry, Chris.
With specific reference to digital literacy and social media.
Sorry, Martin, I apologise. Ruth?
No, not at all.
The five rights was about almost the rights of children in a digital world. So if we look forward to what our digital strategy will be, you can understand that obviously over the events of COVID-19, we've moved hugely in what the rights of a child might be to digital access and what the remote learning might look like, specifically around staying safe online. And I think we have to go wider than social media now for what staying safe online might mean for a child, especially if they're learning remotely. That will be embedded in everything we do around our digital pedagogy, the way we teach, and also the keeping children safe online. That message will absolutely be embedded in things, but taken forward as we move forward. Does that
Thanks
help?
very much, Ruth. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Martin. Chris?
Thank you. My question's on 5.2. Obviously, the report concentrates a lot on the footfall into the centre and how it's improving IEL's business. But I'd be interested if there's any feedback on how this has actually impacted the footfall, etc., with respect to Boglethorne Community Association. So obviously there's a lot of clubs, judo, karate, squash, etc., that are involved in the Boglethorne Community Association. Has the, what do you call it, Inverclyde Leisure's improvements with respect to doing that had a positive or a negative impact on those users of the community centre?
Tony? You'll be able to take that one?
I wouldn't be able to answer that just now. But I can certainly have a look into it and come back to Councillor Curley at a later date, if that's okay. But I don't have the information just now, I'm sorry.
Is that okay, Chris? He's not got the information to hand, but he can get back to you.
No, that's fine, but I think it'd be worthwhile possibly even just bringing it back to committee as well, a further small paragraph or so, because I think it's important we all see the implications of, it's all great we're looking at hopefully get Inverclyde Leisure on a more sustainable footing, but just making sure that they don't crowd other people out, other organisations out of our facilities as well, other users out of our facilities.
Okay. Tommy, Councillor McVeigh?
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick question for officers. I'm just looking for a steering in the bowling club, Rankin Park Bowling Club, which is an outstanding remit. Just looking for any indication when that will be coming back to committee, because I like to keep the club in a loop and give them some feedback. If you could maybe give me a date or a rough idea, please.
I can see blank faces. Tony or Hugh or Ruth?
We're working. Okay, Councillor McVeigh. We had a meeting 2 days ago to look at different options. So all you have for me at the moment is an absolute commitment that we're working through that. I'm not going to be able to give you an absolute date to bring this back. But just to say we are progressing through it as quickly as we can.
Is that okay, Tommy?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Ruth. Thanks, Jim.
Stephen?
I was just only going to say in terms of Bogostone Community Centre, I think we need to remember that this new sort of facility only opened in June 2019, and then for most of the past year, effectively the community centre has been shut. So it'll probably take a while longer to get to a position where actually we know the impact that this investment. So I wouldn't necessarily be rushing back with a report in the next few months, because it's going to take a good while before we're back to any semblance of normality.
Yeah, point taken. Ruth?
Yeah, I would agree with that, yeah.
Okay, Chris. Ruth?
Yeah, not only the fact that we've not been in normal times, when it did reopen, there were no, I'm not aware of any concerns raised about the facility from any community groups. Certainly they didn't reach myself. So hopefully that's hopeful signs. But we will, of course, and we will bring it up with IL to make sure that they work with the community groups to make sure there's access there.
Okay, thanks, Ruth.
Sorry, just on that point, I'm not aware of there being any issues. It's COVID's had a wee bit of an impact on getting together and getting community associations to think, but I have a concern that was one of the things that people had a concern about beforehand, before IL did the great improvement works at Bogostone Communities. I want to make sure that has not had a negative impact, and we've actually, that everything is moving on well. And I just was looking at that report. It just seemed to be concentrating on from an IL perspective, and I think it would have been good to have another perspective from the other groups, other users of the facility as well. But I take Councillor McCabe's point that we might need to wait a little while before we can get that.
And I could see Ruth nodding in agreement there. Councillor MacLeod, Jim, you get any comment on that paper?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I can see where Chris Curley is coming from. I mean, up until 2017, of course, I was one of the councillors for the former Ward 1, and certainly I used to be a fairly regular attender at the Community Association meetings, and I know that time there was only talk about what was going to be happening, and the people had grave concerns, or some of the organisations within the Community Association had concerns that of the impact and effect it might have on them, having their own different projects still running within Bogostone. So it would be interesting to get some feedback. But I take on board that obviously, a lot of us only started up in 2019. Once the centre reopened, and of course the last year it's been closed, but it would be good to get some feedback. I have to say the Spend to Save project has been a resounding success. I mean, I remember when it first started, the gym previously only had just over 100 odd members, if I remember right. So to get up to 1,500 is phenomenal, and obviously it's going to take time to get back into those sort of numbers again once we get back. But it's been a huge success, so it has. Finally, the other point is I think it's I can't believe it's 10 years now since Better Knives, the No Knives Better Lives campaign started, and that's been a great success, and it's been very effective in quelling a lot of knife crime, which is hideous, and what we saw some years ago. And it's interesting to see that some police forces and others down south of the UK have been looking at this initiative too. But so it's been a great success, and I congratulate everybody involved in that. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments, Jim. Is there any other comments from members? If not, can we agree the recommendations? Thank you. And move to agenda item number 6, which is the community's update report. Tony, you want to take us through that?
Okay, thank you. So this provides members with an update on a number of matters, the Regeneration Capital Fund, and there was an addendum put out recently as well to that. and also the fair trade status of Inverclyde, and also a brief paragraph on the financial position of Inverclyde Leisure. Happy to take any questions on that.
Can we maybe say something about the addendum? Because just in case, I think that was sent out last night, so just in case members either never get sight of it or want to know what it is we're talking about. Ruth, I could see you with your hands up. Ruth?
Yeah, so basically the original report was asking for the Scout Group and Parkley branching out to be supported by the RCGF funding, which comes in June. We've asked for an addendum to look at CVS also putting in a bid the June date, and this is, bear in mind, this is for the first round. So basically, we're basically agreeing to delegate responsibility to myself to submit the application for three projects rather than just the original two mentioned there.
Okay, thanks for that, Ruth. What I'll do is I'll open it to questions. First one from Provost, Martin.
Sorry about that, Jim. I possibly should know the answer to this myself, but the Inverclyde Fair Trade Zone application includes reference to work being done on the transatlantic slave trade. I don't know if Ruth or any of the other officers can elaborate on that, on when it's completed, what will it look like, the transatlantic slave trade work.
Ruth?
Okay, so the Fair Trade Zone application is particularly sits by itself as an application to renew our Fair Trade Zone status. We submitted the application, and actually the board were very complimentary about the commitment, especially with the schools, about fair trade work. So the Fair Trade Zone is and the steering group is chaired by a community champion, although we do have a council champion on it too, and it's actually very active. I think they've got an action plan that is looking to take things forward. The work with the anti-slavery work that is ongoing, that has started. So we've got the Short Life Working Group, and that has had its first meeting linked to the Watt Institution, and that has just had its first meeting 2 weeks ago, and we've got a second meeting coming up to look at the reparations and take forward that and bring a full report back to the committee.
Thanks very much, Ruth. Would that include some form of exhibition at the Watt Institution?
It will be, it won't necessarily be an exhibition that I think are looking at. It's particularly looking at reinterpreting some of the exhibitions that are there, and some work around the artifacts that are already in the museum.
Yes.
Thank you, Ruth. Thanks. Martin,
as you know, I think it's always very emotive subject, you know, and especially when we hold our local heroes as James Watt, and other people will say, well, look at his history as well. So I think we've got to play Colcanny in that and make sure we have our site and history on it as well. Sorry.
Quite, Jim. Quite.
Looking at any other questions? If there's no other questions, can we agree the report?
Agree.
And can I thank you all very much for that part of the community side of the agenda, and can I look forward to seeing you all back at 4 o'clock? Thank you.